my story is because Bruce heard it about a year ago, and he called me and he said, would you tell the story? And I said, you know, it's scarier than the story you heard. But one of the things we all know is we hear that fear is the unknown. And I've been in some hairy Molokai races, which Eddie knows what that's like when you're feeling totally out there, and you've trained for it, so you're not afraid of it, even though everyone else is. I've been through the eye of a hurricane in a racing yacht in the Tasman Ocean, and when I was hearing the boat story, I was thinking, yeah, you just push through, you just keep going, you don't stop, you've trained for it, you've been doing this all through the South Pacific, you know, you don't stop. Death is the only thing that we don't train for. And we really don't know what to do and how to deal with it when it happens. And so the fear of dealing with death, I think, is probably the ultimate fear. Molokai, you may think you're going to die, but you know you're not, because you're just going to push through it. Going through the eye of a hurricane with 80-mile-an-hour winds and huge waves crashing over you, you hope you're going to get through it. This is the death of my husband in 2000. He had terminal cancer. He wanted to die at home. We were taking care of him with hospice, with huge amounts of morphine. More and more amounts of morphine. Morphine will kill you if the other thing doesn't. And he had decided early on and let us know that he was not going to become a vegetable to be taken care of. He was going to find out about euthanizing himself, and in the best way. He bought a book called Final Exit, which I had never heard of, which had been on the Times bestseller list for 2 years. And he had studied it. He had huge volumes of OxyContin, and he had patches on himself, the whole thing. Well, the hospice nurse had told us that the next day when she was coming, they were going to up the amount of the diurgesic patch, and he would be in a vegetative state. He had already been paralyzed for about a month, basically from his arms down. And my sons left college and came and helped me take care of him. We had to turn him during the night. We had 2-hour shifts, sort of like on the yacht, to turn him constantly during the night. And we really bonded closely as a family. We were just working through death, and we really didn't know what we were doing. And he decided he was just going to keep all that OxyContin, which I could have sold for a fortune on the market. And back in those days, you didn't know about, you know, how that worked. But he decided on this certain night, when he found out the next day it was going to be vegetation time, and he wanted to take care of it himself. He didn't want us involved legally or whatever. He had the greatest doctor in town, Dr. Kuntz. Couldn't involve him because of laws and everything. And so he decided that night, he had a really good glass of wine, which you can't have because you're on morphine, and was going to say goodbye to us. He took this whole vial of OxyContin, which what he was on already, my son, who's now a lawyer and pretty bright, looked at it and said, gee, just with what he takes daily, that 3 doses of that, just half of that would kill a person. And yet, when you're on a drug like that, your body builds up an immunity, and he took the entire bottle. And we laid down with him and thought he would die. And we woke up in the morning, and his eyes opened, and he looked at us and went, oh, shit. And which literally, that was the scariest time in my life, because it's nothing you could prepare for, nothing you could do. And all you could I could remember is in high school seeing all the drug overdosed films, and I thought, what are we going to do? There's no way we can get our hands on that much OxyContin to get him through the next day. What are we going to do? And being the consummate educator that he was, he grabbed that book and he said, what's number 2, plan B? And in the book, it didn't say, and now it does, you can't OD yourself on what you're taking. You have to take a barbiturate, not an opiate. Or if you're on an opiate, you have to go to barbiturate. This is, this is for dying, not for getting high. So what happened is we called the doctor, or he called the doctor. He took care of it himself, and we were all so afraid of him going into an overdose seizure, and which is like the scariest. And he called his doctor, and he said, I need a month's supply of sleeping pills in capsule form. And I didn't know what he was doing. I was like, okay, he was reading this book. My sons went to pick it up, had to sign for it. It was all very legal. They were bringing it back from the post. They'd come back through Holualoa town, the post office. And they saw this furry thing on the side of the road. And my one son jumped out, took his T-shirt off, threw it around it, and it was an eel, which is the hawk that is my husband's amakua. And it was alive, but it was laying there. And so my son put his shirt around it. They brought it back in the truck. My husband was out on the deck in the hospital bed. And they ran in and said, Dad, here's your sleeping pills. But look what we have. And they put the eel on my husband's chest, took the T-shirt off. And they said, it has a broken wing or something. I don't know, it's still alive, but we've got to get a vet. And so we were all going, okay, we've got to take care of this eel. And we totally forgot about, his problem with the OxyContin. And the eel stood up on my husband's chest, looked him straight in the eyes, and flew off. And left, in fact, I was hoping to stop at my house and get the picture of my husband at the wheel of the yacht that we used to sail, because I had the feather that was left on his chest with that picture. And it was sort of like the glass slipper. It was like, yes, I was really here, and this feather laying on his chest. And we were just celebrating. We were so excited that it was okay, that its wing wasn't broken and everything. And that was more important than anything. And then he went about the task of emptying the vials of sleeping medication into 2 scoops of yogurt, which was the directions in the book, stirring it up, and getting ready to euthanize himself. It's amazing how easy it is. I don't know why people go through all the things that they grew, the Kevorkians and everything, because what it does is it immediately puts you into a very sound sleep. You're not ingesting pills. You're just taking 2 scoops of yogurt or pudding or ice cream, whatever it is. And so he immediately went into a sleep. In about an hour, his breathing stopped. It was all very dignified, very calm, wonderful. We were holding him, telling him how much we loved him. Thalia knew him, so that's pretty exciting, pretty cool. And he was a wonderful person. And I, immediately when we realized he had stopped breathing, I called my kumahula, which was this wonderful, wonderful fellow who's since died, J.J. Akiona. I don't know, you guys know him. And I called J.J. and said, Uncle Phil has just died. What do I do in the Hawaiian tradition? And he said, oh my God. And I said, well, you wouldn't believe what happened. And I told him the story of the eel on his chest. And my husband has always been totally infatuated with hawks. And when we got to Hawaii, the eel was just like, wow. And this is its own category of animal. And JJ just went ballistic, and he said, Sammy, he said, Uncle deserved this. He was the most incredible person. And he said, I have not heard of an eo visiting, or a amakua visiting the dying person, other than my grandfather, and then you told me the story of his grandfather back in the day when they had cabins down at Ka'alu'u, and they lived there, and he was a fisherman, and he was dying, and the family was down by the water, and they heard this big thump on the canoe, and they looked, and there was a shark heading right back out of the shallows of Ka'ulu. And the family just went nuts, and they went running up to the grandfather to say, your amakua visited you, and the grandfather was dead. And he said, I've never heard of that happening, but in the tradition I was taught, that the amakua will visit you 3 times in the next year. And take tea leaves, take 5 to 7 uneven, odd number tea leaves, hang them over Uncle's head tonight as he lays in state on the deck before you move him. And just be blessed that, you know, you had that experience. And he said, what an experience for me, you know, because wow. And after all the tension of the day that had happened with him, like possibly going into a drug overdose, to have this blessing happen was amazing. And I just thought, yeah, okay, I never see an eel around. There's trees all around us, big mango trees, never see eels. Then about 2 months after my husband died, I walked out my front door, and there was an eel, the same age eel that had been on my husband, sitting right in front of my front door on the railing, just staring me in the face. And I was like, I don't believe this. I ran and got a camera. And when I came back, he was in a mango branch very low, right up above me. I had to go to the dentist. I had an appointment, which I was late for. And I took pictures of the front and the back and the side of this eel. And I talked to him, and he just sat there and looked at me in the middle of the day. And I was just like, wow, you know, if that's you and you're letting me know that there's something going on this island other than what we know, thank you. So that happened. I took the picture. About, I don't know, another month went by. His cousin and another friend were visiting, and an eel just buzzed in between us on the deck. Just, you could feel the waves of air on our cheeks, and just totally went right in between us. And we went, wow, God, number 2. And the third time, another month or so later, I was working in my garden, and an eel just buzzed right down, just right in front of me. And I didn't know what it was. I stood up, and I could again feel the wind on my face. And I saw the eel take off and go up into a mango tree the 3 times. I've never saw another eel for 5 years. On the day, 5 years on the day of his death, my son and a friend were down hiking in the bottom of our property. Again, no eels for 5 years. On the day of his death, my son came running up with his friend and said, Mom, Mom, an eel came and landed on a branch right next to us and didn't leave. It just stayed there. And I just went, oh, you know what today is? And he didn't remember. He knew it was approximate. And I said, this is the 5th anniversary of your dad's death. And we all went, whoa, chicken skin. So there's a lot happens on this island and in Hawaii that when Akumu says they feel spirits on the land, it happens, it's true. And when I was down on one part of my property trying to figure out if I should sell it or not to give money to my kids, and I just didn't know, I heard these real soft voices saying to me, you take care of us, we'll take care of you. And I started crying, and immediately it came to me, I'll buy the land to give to my sons the money, because this was the inheritance from my husband for them, this land. And I went back to my car crying, my truck, and the phone rang, and it was the kumu that blessed the property. And I said to him, you know, Auli'u, why did you just call me? And he said, oh, I heard you're just a grandmother and blah, blah, blah. And I went, oh my God, but you know what just happened? I just heard the voices that you told me that you heard when you blessed the property. And he just laughed and said, see, Sammy, we're not crazy. So anyway, that's the story. And